Welcome, welcome, welcome. You're listening to the Ask Brien radio show on KHTS 1220 and 98.1 FM. Well, as everybody knows, we've been doing this show for almost, let's see, we started in December of 2016. So we've been going on a long time, almost 8 years. And each week we try to help business owners learn something about business. And this week is no different. But, everybody wants to know why the show is called Ask Brien. We have our host, Peter. We have our co-host, Traci. There's no Brien there. Where did Brien come from? Anyway, we do have the resident E expert, Traci, if she's there. And she's going to try to explain why Brien is spelled with an E. Because when we went to school, when we went to school,
oh, Lord.
Brien was spelled B-R-I-A-N or B-R-Y-A-N. But the only Brien, B-R-I-E-N, was the O'Briens down the street, the Irish people who used to go to the pub or eat potatoes. Nothing personal.
Well, I knew you were going to bring up a pub because you just got back from London, and my guess is that you visited many a pub, my friend.
Well, fish and chips are pretty good, and everyone should have a cider that's not really apple.
Oh, okay. Well, that has nothing to do with our E's, but I will tell you something that does have to do with our E's, and that is our exceptional engineer. Hello, Jen.
Hi. How are you, Trace?
I'm doing great, and we just couldn't do our show without our engineer, so it's always important to recognize you first, of course. But then the second most important part of the E's and our experience here on the Ask Brien radio show.
My ego?
No, your ego is always at play. Today is no different. Tomorrow won't be any different. I'm sure yesterday wasn't any different. But the other element that is consistent as your ego is our experts. And our experts have invested a minimum of 10,000 hours in their specific business category or niche. And for those of you who just love to hear me stumble over the math, that in practical terms, if you were working on the average of 40 hours a week, 50-ish weeks a year, that would take you 5 years. But come on, startups, we know that's not happening. Everybody who's starting a business better strap in, if they haven't already, for doing a little bit more than 40 hours a week. And so, 3 years maybe we could accelerate that. This year for me, even though I'm not a startup anymore, I feel like it's happened in 1 year. So whatever. And speaking of that, I think, Peter, although you lack a certain amount of empathy.
What is that? What's empathy?
Yeah, exactly. I just wanted you to know
heard that word before.
You should be giving me some empathy because I have a torn tendon in my left bicep, and it has made my energy very low because I've had to do everything one-handed recently. And you didn't know that because you were traveling abroad, living your best life. But I just wanted you to know I need a little
that injury did not happen
the
injury did not happen at the office, correct?
It did not happen.
So it's not covered by workers' comp. We're set. Go ahead.
Yes, it is. There is no scenario where that would be feasible. No. So unfortunately, probably. But anyway, okay. So we have such a great guest that I just want to say that I am very enthusiastic about our guests. How are you feeling?
Excitement! As Sam Kinson said.
Wow, that wasn't as strong as you usually do.
Well, that's because...
No. Don't say that. It was great.
Hey.
Don't give him a second chance.
That's because I got back from London at 3:30 in the morning, and I'm still kind of like...
Jet lag. Okay.
Exactly.
So that's the key. That's what we need to do, Traci.
Send me every week. Send me coming back on Wednesday nights.
Yeah, I got it. I think we're on to something here, Jen.
And I can do pub interviews.
You could.
Yes. Okay. Well, we have a lot of education that's brought into the show for our entrepreneurs, and I think our guests. I'm so excited to have this conversation with our guests today because we've talked a lot about how much you have to work to start a business, and we're going to talk even more about the challenges and hurdles of entrepreneurs facing. And she is going to talk to us about how to avoid being burned out and to really embrace rest. So I'm thinking, like, let's just get on with this party because it's a conversation we need to have. But I'm pretty sure there's one more E that I always like to share, but I don't want to share that until Peter, like, really presents it in the beautiful way he always does every show.
Well, except you can't see me, but I can go, grease lightning is...
electrifying, and so are we.
All right. Well, there are a couple of E's, but great job there. Great to have an E expert. Now, it's very interesting because since I just did get back from a long trip, I do want to discuss coming back, at 3:30 in the morning and having to do all this work today. You can probably help me out with, okay, you're jet lagged, you're kind of tired, and you haven't worked in a couple of days, and how do you get your energy back? But before we do, and without any further ado, A-D-I-E-U, I love that word because it has, what does it have? Just one consonant, all those vowels. All right. So our guest today is Meagan. Meagan, you there?
Yes. Hi.
All right. You survived. All right. Half the people
I
just
survived.
Half the people just run out the door. Oh my God, I can't deal with that. What is going on here? Anyway. So Meagan, first of all, before we get into what you're currently working on, we want to just know who you are. So we want to know, give us a little bit of a background. We don't need to know from kindergarten on, but basically once you started working, give us a little background, a little summary. Thanks.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Thanks so much for having me. So I started my career as a psychotherapist, and I was in private practice as a therapist. So I was just a one-woman show, and I hung my shingle in my town and was seeing therapy clients. I was a couples and sex therapist, and I did that for many years, and decided along the way that I was feeling called to work with business owners. This was around the time I had actually started to expand my therapy practice. I hired other therapists. It became an agency. I was an agency model, and I loved the business building side of things so much that I decided to hang up my hat as a therapist and pivot into the business coaching space. And for quite a few years, I was working with people who, small business owners like myself, who were looking to really create small businesses that worked better for them. And along that journey, I discovered that I was actually less interested in the strategic, practical, logistical side of growing a business. And I was much more interested in bringing my therapy skill set to these bigger questions about how small business owners can really take care of themselves and live truly robust and wealthy lives while doing the hard work of operating a small business.
And so when did you make that pivot?
I made that pivot. I mean, I would say the pivot's been more of an evolution versus like one moment of the pivot. But the pivot really started for me in 2018 and just continues evolving and revealing itself to me. Every quarter, I feel like I have a little bit more clarity about what I am meant to be doing and how I can, best serve the clients that I work with.
So are they called clients or patients for you?
Definitely clients. So I am no longer practicing as a therapist.
Okay.
And that's kind of when you're practicing as a therapist, you're actually quite limited in the ways in which you're able to work with people and where you can work with people. So hanging up that therapist hat has really allowed me to open myself up to more flexible and diverse ways of working. And it's important to note with people who are coming to me, hey, I'm not your therapist. I'm not your therapist. You need a therapist. It's not me. But what I am bringing into our work together is an understanding of emotional health, of relationships. So I'm able to bring to the table to business conversations elements and layers of nuance and depth that most strategic business coaches aren't as familiar with.
So when who's your client? Is your client a business owner or is it a company?
Great question. My clients are business owners. I would say about 70% of my clients are, solopreneurs. So it's just them and perhaps a virtual assistant or an executive assistant. And then I have a group of clients who are running smaller companies. So maybe they have a team between, 5 to 15 people. But I really love working with people who are staying small and mighty in the businesses that they're creating.
And so if you took on a new client, well, first of all, how do you find your clients?
I find my clients primarily through email marketing. So my newsletter is my main form of content creation, if you will. It's my main form of communicating and curating an audience. We just launched a podcast actually a couple of months ago called Deeply Rested. So I'm hoping that that's going to be a really exciting outlet for me and my team. And we love bringing people into the Deeply Rested newsletter. People come into the newsletter, they get to know me through the newsletter, and when the time is right, they raise their hand to become a client.
So if somebody wanted to sign up for the newsletter from today's show, how would they go about that?
They could do that at deeplyrested.com/newsletter.
Deeplyrested.com? And
Yep, deeplyrested.com/newsletter will take you right to the sign-up page for the newsletter.
Super, super. And about currently, how many clients do you have?
Oh, that's a great question. I work with people in lots of different capacities. We have paid client communities, so groups that I facilitate. We have some free groups we facilitate. And then I have a handful of private clients that I work with one-on-one. Deep Rest retreats as part of our offering. So these are in-person 5-day gatherings. Business owners come together, and I guide them through this process on retreat. So at any given time, I would say we have between probably 20 to 50 clients, depending on how many groups we're running.
And are you doing this remotely, or is this being done in your office? Or do you go to their office?
Most of it's remote. Yeah, most of my work is virtual. So I'm located in Portland, Oregon. So when I happen to connect with a client who lives locally, it's a treat to be able to connect, to work together in person. Obviously, the 5-day retreats are always in-person gatherings, and everything else happens via Zoom.
And are these retreats in Portland, Oregon, or do you do them outside of Portland?
All over the place. Right now, our next retreat, which is happening just a couple weeks here at the end of October, will be at a retreat facility just outside of Portland. Next year, we're hoping to branch out and host retreats in different parts of the country as well.
And so somebody decides, do you have different packages for people to sign up, or how does that work?
So I'm a big believer that as a business owner, we need to be doing what works for us first and foremost. It's one of my big beliefs that my business is for me first and my client second. That's a major tenet that I work with my clients too. How can you make your business really work for you? And something I've learned about myself over the last couple decades of being in the business space is that I don't like doing the same thing in the same way for too long. I need variety. I need things to change and evolve, sometimes rather rapidly. So I'm really intentional about not narrowing myself and packages that kind of keep me locked into a certain way of working for a long time. So I tend to change up my offerings seasonally, just kind of checking in with myself. How do I want to work with people right now? And then I'll float that to my audience and say, hey, who does this align for? And with who does this align with in this moment? Right now, I'm doing 3-month private mentorship with folks who want to work with me privately, where we're connecting every week, and every week for between 45 minutes to 3 hours, depending on where we are in the process. And that feels great. And next year, I'm anticipating that we're going to move towards more group offerings, so more facilitated group experiences. And I like to keep it fresh and do what feels right.
So what can a business owner expect after the first 30 days of working with you?
That's such a good question. I think it depends, kind of like when you go to therapy, right? It depends what you get out in the first 30 days really depends on what you're bringing to the work that we're doing together, right? The way that I work as a mentor, it isn't a one-size-fits-all approach. It is not heavily curriculum-based. So everyone isn't walking through the same protocol, or the same recipe. I'm really meeting my clients where they are in this moment and helping them discern what needs to be different for you. So I think at the end of the first 30 days, what I want people to be experiencing across the board is a deeper sense of clarity about how they're doing and what they need to change so that their business is working better for them and they're feeling more rested and more aligned with their life. So at the end of that 30 days, I really want you to be feeling more connected to yourself and a little bit clearer about what the real questions and problems are that you want to answer and solve.
So this seems partly business, but partly personal, right? I mean, you're dealing
That's right. Yeah, exactly.
You're dealing with both aspects, right? So one aspect, how does this help my business? But on the other hand, you have a personal, everyone has a different personality, different background, and they have different things that could be hindering why they're successful or not, right? Something may have happened to them years and years ago, but you're not getting into that therapy part of it, or are you? To determine, hey, this is why you're not, this is why you procrastinate every week.
Mm-hmm. That's a great question. So I'll answer that in two ways. First, yes, I'm a big believer that the line between professional and personal is often quite arbitrary, right? We're taught that our businesses are these things that exist separate from us. And if you own a huge company, that might be true. But for most people who are small business owners, when it's just you or you and a small team, your business really is an extension of who you are. And your business is the vehicle that's going to help you live the life that you want to live. So I believe that the more we can erase that line between professional and personal and really blend who we are and what we need with the businesses that we're creating, the happier we're going to be as business owners. So erasing that line, bringing the personal into the professional is a key component to the work that I'm doing with business owners. It's my job to make sure we don't veer into territory that really would require a therapist. So that might be trauma that you need to process if you have a mental health diagnosis like depression or obsessive compulsive disorder. These are the areas where I would say, hey, let's circle that. I want you to take that to therapy, and let's you and I stay focused on these conversations that are more about the overlap between your personal life and your business.
That was great. We're going to take a quick break. You're listening to the Ask Brien radio show on KHTS 1220, 98.1 FM. We'll be right back. Welcome back. You're listening to the Ask Brien radio show on KHTS 1220 and 98.1 FM. The Ask Brien show. Like no other station in the world, that's what KHTS is. Traci, you had some questions.
I mean, it's just hard to it's hard to shine after that. But I'll find a way, trust me. And we'll do that through our expert because she's really presenting some really great, thoughtful, considerate content for us to ponder over today. And I want to dig in a little bit deeper on, there's probably not an entrepreneur listening to this live radio show or the replay on the podcast that isn't saying, am I burned out? Is this burnout, or am I just tired? Is this fatigue, or am I flailing? I think it would be so critical, I think, to really walk through, what are the phases of burnout, and how do you identify whether you're just fatigued and need a vacation by the pool, or do you need a full-on reset? So talk us through what to pay attention to for ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, I want to say that these titles, these labels, at the end of the day, they're all pretty arbitrary. If you don't feel good in your business, regardless of where you are on the burnout spectrum, it's worth paying attention to, and it's worth kind of slowing down and really examining what's going on. Because like I said earlier, I want your business to work for you. I want your business to serve you in your entire life in a really holistic way. And if you are fatigued, stressed, angry, resentful, whatever the case may be, something is off and it needs attention. So I just want to say that as the disclaimer. And then zooming out, yes, I think, of course, there's a spectrum of burnout. And I would say depression also exists on that spectrum. It can be hard sometimes for people to know, am I depressed or am I burnt out? Because they can look pretty similar. So when you're in burnout, when you're in what we can call clinical burnout, you really are struggling. You are struggling to maintain day-to-day operations, right? It can be hard to get out of bed. You can feel rageful, resentful, or on the opposite end of the spectrum, you can feel totally numbed out. Your motivation is gone. Your passion is gone. and you're just kind of ready to down and get a job at Starbucks. If you're at that point in the process, like, why am I even doing this? So burnout, it has that level of intensity that really is hard to get over. A vacation will only make your burnout worse, right? Because you get a momentary escape from reality, but when you come back, you're even more behind than you were when you left, and you feel even worse than before you went to the pool, right? So that's how I would describe burnout. And then there are lesser degrees of a similar feeling, right? Maybe you are feeling stressed, overwhelmed. Maybe you do just need a break, but you have to really do some discerning within yourself to say, okay, what is real life right now? And how much capacity do I have to get myself to a better place? Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. I was wondering if you could get even more specific about some pink flags to look for before they turn into red flags, things that may go just beyond some of the standard things we think about in terms of fatigue or burnout, so that people can have awareness around what's happening with them.
Yeah, that's great. Pink flag that I hear all the time is the phrase, I love my work, but I can't do it this way anymore. Right? So when you feel in your body, you're like, wait, I still love my work, whatever it is. I'm still here for it. I'm still inspired by it. But the way that I'm doing it right now has an expiration date. If you hear yourself saying that, if you feel that kind of sense in your body, that's a pink flag, right? Because the good news is you still have some passion, connection, motivation, and those are the feelings. That's the gas in the gas tank, if you will, that helps us figure out how to navigate around burnout. So that's a really great place to start paying attention. I think another place to pay attention is when you start to feel like a little bit, not necessarily fatigued, like physically fatigued, but you start feeling a little bit tired of the work that you're doing. You have a sense of like, okay, I think it's time for something new. I think it's time for something fresh, but maybe you feel really stuck in the work that you're doing now and the business model that you're doing now. This is when people talk about having golden handcuffs, right? I feel kind of financially trapped to the way things are going today, but I can feel that I actually want to go somewhere different. That's a good pink flag moment to notice, I need to intervene. I need to make some changes so that this doesn't lead to a deeper well of burnout.
And so with that being the sort of the trigger points or the moments to pay attention to, what are some easy tips that people can implement when they are starting to feel front end instead of waiting until it's, become much more of a serious matter to address? Like, what are some things that people can do?
Great.
Counteract
I think the first thing you can do to really prevent burnout is to do an assessment of your life and your business and kind of ask yourself, where am I feeling really good in my life? Where am I feeling really good in my business? And where are things maybe lacking a bit? Do an inventory of your world, especially inside of your business. This is a great place to start asking questions like, am I working with the kind of clients that really light me up and energize me? Or am I working with clients that I dread seeing every day? And what about the way you're working with clients? Is the delivery method you're using, is that working for you? Does that feel good, the kind of services you're delivering? So I want you to look at all of the elements of your business and really get clear with yourself. Are those things working for me or are they not working for me? And then I want you to take that a little bit deeper and start asking, how is my business serving me personally, right? Is my business supporting me and being well rested? Does my business allow me the time off that I need to go on vacation, to spend time with my family? Is my business supporting my life, or are the two of these things in conflict with each other? And as you start to get honest with yourself about these elements, and as you start to get clear about where you're doing well, but also, where things are out of balance, you can begin to create an action plan that will inevitably protect you from burnout, because the more supported you feel in your business in a holistic way, the further away from burnout you're going to move.
You know what? I think let's take a break for the sponsor because I have a question that's going to take way longer than 60 seconds for you to answer.
Great. I love it.
I was wondering what that long pause was for.
I was like, I can't do this in 60 seconds or less. There's no way.
That's all right. We don't want to cut you off, but we do want to say thank you to our sponsor, Legal Steps. It's LEGALSTEPZ. That's spelled with a Z.com. So you've been thinking about, gosh, I got to try and start my own business. Where do I even begin? Well, you just start at legalsteps.com. It could not be any easier. The courses are very affordable, under $150. So you've made it this far. You've got this great idea or great product. Don't let $150 get in the way. I know that things are tight right now. Everybody's feeling the same. But find that $150 and make this happen for yourself. You will not regret it. And you get into the course, you kind of see how it goes along. It's really very simple. The experts that work at legalsteps.com are there on your screen with you. So you know that you're in good hands. That's what I really loved about it. I knew that I was answering the questions the right way because sometimes some of these legal questions can get a little confusing and you want to make sure that you've answered it properly. Otherwise, you kind of set yourself back inadvertently. So these experts, over 30 years experience, if you get to the point where you're totally confused and totally frustrated, they'll just do it for you. So you really have nothing to lose. You can take a course on how to register a trademark, form an S corporation, form an LLC. I took one of the courses a little while ago just to kind of get a feel for it. I don't have a business that I'm trying to start, but I wanted to see what we're talking about. And it was so simple. I have 2 kids running around and a dog barking, and it's a crazy house. And I was able to pick and choose what worked for me, my own schedule, not someone else's schedule. I could do it right there in the comfort of my own kitchen, in between dogs barking and that kind of thing. But it was great. I loved it. I was able to pause, rewind, take notes, and it took me less than 2 hours. So go to legalsteps.com, legalstepz.com, and make that dream happen that you've been thinking about for the longest time. The experts at legalsteps.com can help you get there.
Thank you, Legal Steps. Thank you, Jen. And we're back to our show. You're listening to the Ask Brien radio show on KHTS 1220 and 98.1 FM. Traci, you're on.
So when you were talking earlier about support, I started thinking about one of the challenges with, and I know you mentioned that a lot of your clients are solopreneurs, and they're basically having to navigate all of the pieces and parts of running a business. So they're the business development person, they're the tech support, they're the online business manager, they're all of the things to all of the people, right? As they're also trying to deliver and execute on their own deliverables for their clients. Would you agree that this challenge around support in terms of from a chicken and eggs perspective? So I know when you were talking about support, you were talking about feeling supported with your peers, your family, other business colleagues, support like that you offer for your clients and things like that. But how do you help your clients with this journey through getting out of the I do everything in my business all the time and help them really position themselves to be able to extend and bring in more support for them so they can implement some of the practices that you teach them? It feels like such a conundrum of chicken and egg.
It absolutely is a conundrum, and it's such a personal question too, right? Because we all have access to different financial resources, which makes the hiring process or getting help, if it's paid help for the first time, it's, I can't just assume that if there are 5 people sitting in front of me, all 5 have the resources to hire support, even though all 5 need support, because we all need support. So I want to talk about this. It's a great question, and we'll just be nuanced about it, understanding that different people are coming from, different financial positions. And I also want to say, I think this question, it applies to business owners with, small, medium to large teams just as much as it does to solopreneurs. I find business owners to be some of the most resilient human beings and the most stubborn human beings at the same time. You know what I mean? Like we all we're successful as business owners because we've learned how to operate in the world in a really independent, self-sufficient way, right? This is a gift. This is a strength. But there comes a point, like you're saying, when what we're building and creating, it really does, it needs more hands on deck. And it can be so hard for us to loosen our grip on control, to loosen our grip around financial scarcity, to really allow ourselves to be supported in ways in which perhaps we've never been supported before in our lives or our businesses. So the first thing I would recommend to a client in this situation is to really think about why it's hard for you to get help, right? Because this is going to be a different answer for every single person. Why do you feel like you have to wear all of the hats? What is the block or the fear that's making it hard for you to take the next step to get the support that you need? Sometimes it is about control, right? Someone doesn't know how to relinquish control. Sometimes it is about financial. And when it's about money, I often say, okay, let's discern, is this perceived financial scarcity or real financial scarcity? Because if you're in real financial scarcity, please don't hire support, right? That will only make your life worse. That will only make you feel more stressed. But if you're in perceived financial scarcity where you do have money, but you kind of live every day believing that you don't have money, then you need to get some money support, money mindset support to make that first hire. So I want to understand, and this is where the therapist in me comes in really handy. Like what actually is going on for you that makes it hard for you to take that next step? And it's usually pretty deeply rooted. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. And I think that it's something that what I really love is that you do have the therapist insight on that, because, what I want to really reiterate and support as a takeaway from what you said is that it's not always about the finances. It might just be your perception around the finances. There's a phrase I use: is it real fear or is it faux fear? And and then really examining like where's the fear being generated from? Is it something that are you hoarding your cash flow because you're fearful you'll come up short and then you're making your life more difficult? Like there's so many different ways to address these scenarios, when I think a lot of times it's just really easy to blame it on the bottom line when that's really only one component.
I agree.
Important. And then I'd love to also explore from this therapeutic perspective, how does procrastination fit into this too? Because I've often observed that procrastination is its own defense mechanism, and it has its own psychological components wrapped up in it as well. So could you speak to that?
I can. I think procrastination is a fascinating topic because just like the struggle hiring support, the root of procrastination goes really deep, and it can be so different for all of us. I want to shout out one book I read years ago around hiring support that I really enjoyed, called Who Not How. I don't know if y'all are familiar with this book, but the premise is, as a business owner, don't ask or who not how. I think I'm getting the name of that correct. But the question is, if you find yourself saying, "Oh, how can I do this?" Instead, ask, "Who can do this for me?" And so anytime you feel yourself asking how, it really should be a who question. And then when you find yourself procrastinating, I got this straight from this book, and I thought it was such a brilliant view on procrastination. They said, when you find yourself procrastinating, take a step back and ask yourself if it's actually a who, not how moment. Right? Are you procrastinating because it really isn't the task that you should be doing? We're really quick to pathologize procrastination. Oh, what's wrong with you that you're such a procrastinator, right? We say it like a criticism, but actually there can be some profound wisdom in procrastination. It could be your own intuition saying, don't do that task. That task actually isn't meant for you. You need to hire some support to get someone else to do that task. Or on the flip side, if we're looking at it from a different angle, sometimes procrastination can be a little bit of self-sabotage behavior, right? So maybe if what I'm procrastinating on is a really big goal, I'm trying to level up to the next threshold of success or achievement in my business, and I'm getting in my own way. Procrastination can be a little window into the ways in which I might be holding myself back. those are just a couple interesting ways to look at procrastination.
We're going to have to take a quick break. You're listening to the Ask Brien radio show on KHTS 1220 and 98.1 FM. Welcome back. You're listening to the Ask Brien radio show on KHTS 1220 and 98.1 FM. And we are back. Traci.
Okay, so we could just continue and explore so much more of the topics that you have brought forth for us today. And I know that there are people that are going to want to dig deeper, maybe come to one of those amazing client retreats you're hosting or get involved in some of your communities. So, Meagan, what is the best way for our audience to circle back and connect with you?
Thank you so much for asking that. I would love anyone who is resonating with this conversation. Please come my way. You're welcome in this community. I think the easiest thing to do right away will be join the Deeply Rested newsletter. These are weekly emails that dive deeper into these interesting topics. Just, some of the things we've talked about today have been newsletter topics. So you can come and join the Deeply Rested newsletter, and you can subscribe at deeplyrested.com/newsletter. And I would also encourage listeners to check out the Deeply Rested podcast. And the purpose of this podcast is really to create a space for business owners, people who are doing good work in the world, to learn how to take incredibly good care of themselves. Right? So how do we operate profitable, successful businesses without burnout? Now, how do we honor our ambitions and our mission and ourselves and our families all at the same time? These are the conversations we're having with some very successful and well-known leaders in the business space. And you can check out the podcast page at deeplyrested.com/podcast.
Well, and I love it that you're doing a podcast on this, because I just think these are important conversations to have, and it's such a great platform for you to get your perspectives and your insights similar to what you've shared today out there. So thank you for doing that. And speaking of podcasts, I can't stress enough how you can get all of the information from this episode as well as our previous episodes as we have released those, and all of the great contact information in the show notes, as well as even highlighting the Who Not How book, and all of the resources that Meagan shared will be showing up as the podcast. And we want you to go to Ask Brien, the podcast, wherever you find your favorite listening to your favorite podcast. Sorry about that. I don't know why my tongue is so tied. I guess I'm just so excited to talk about the podcast. But it is the Ask Brien podcast, and of course that's AskBrien. And once again, you can find Meagan's podcast and the Ask Brien podcast wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. How many more times can I get podcasts into one sentence, Peter? I don't know. Like, you would think I was a podcast producer or something.
I'm going to ask you to do the Peter Piper Picta, whatever. Anyway. Thanks, Traci. And we're back on the show. All right, so we have about a minute left, not a lot of time. So the question everybody wanted to know, Meagan, was, what was your biggest challenge starting this business?
No, I would say my biggest challenge starting this iteration of the business in particular is helping people understand what it is I'm doing, because I am creating something that, as far as I know, doesn't really exist in the business space, this place where we really are blending the personal and the professional, the strategy and the soul. And it's been complicated finding the language to describe that and answering questions like, well, what do you do and how do you help people? And I've met a lot of people recently who have similar dilemmas, right? When you're doing something that's new, something that really hasn't existed prior to today, finding a way to talk about that and create messaging about that can be a little bit tricky.
Wow. All right, we don't have a lot of time left, so we're gonna be sadly ending the show. All right. Thank you very much. You're listening to the Ask Brien Radio Show, KHTS 1220, 98.1 FM. Over and out. Till next week.